Remember, put Jesus on the front, pray before you go. In the battle of the urban assault cruiser between Harley-Davidson and Yamaha, the Bolt RSPEC still stands pretty strong. So you got a nice 61.8 inch wheelbase, so you got really good straight line stability. Apparently all the Yamaha Bolts made before 2021 were 54 horsepower. Everything after 2021, as I've read, is 65 horsepower. I'm not sure what they did differently with the motor. 942cc, 65 horsepower, 52 foot-pounds of torque, 5-speed, wet clutch, air-cooled, belt drive. You know, this was actually made to dismantle the Harley-Davidson 883 iron. Someone did an aftermarket slip-on, gives it a nice throaty rumble. Those creatures from A Quiet Place, you hear them? Let's go for a ride.
The first thing you're going to notice when you jump on the Bolt is the low seat height and how easy it is to ride. This bike is super light, super flickable. It's 542 pounds wet. Almost anybody can really boss it around. With a 3.4 gallon tank and 51 miles per gallon, you find your fuel range right about 140 miles. It's just a nice get around kind of bike. I do like the fact that they put a 19-inch tall front tire on the front. Now it's a 100, so it's nice and thin, which is great for cutting through water. And they give you a 150 on the back. That's a pretty cool get around, get anywhere kind of tire selection. I found it extremely stable on the highway with the wheelbase being what it is. I thought it was very, very stable in a straight line. It's a windy day in Missouri. And even so, the bike held itself very, very well, even though it's only 542 pounds wet. In terms of the suspension travel, I thought the 4.7 inches was enough. The 2.8 in the back with that little reservoir and the piggyback suspension, I thought was very good. I didn't notice anything that was really, uncomfortable about the suspension or the ride, even though it's under 3 inches of travel in the back. I thought it was a really pretty comfortable bike overall. It's not something I'd want to tour with, but for getting around town, I thought it was awesome. There is something that you should definitely be aware of with the Bolt. As you're riding, on your right knee, you're going to feel the airbox. On your left knee, mashed against it, you're going to feel one of the cylinders. It's just the way it is. If you're a get your knees around the tank kind of rider, this bike might unnerve you a little bit because it's really not going to let you do that. There's too many things sticking out. It can be a little awkward. If you're not used to it. It didn't bother me that much. I will say the engine braking was very smooth. The brakes, even though you got one rotor on the front, was enough. This bike is not very heavy at all. Now, you've got a digital display, basically. It can be kind of hard to see in the sun. Not that it's giving you that much information. You've got trip 1, trip 2, odometer, clock, and your miles per hour. That's kind of it, but that's all right. I just would have preferred to see dials on something like this. Maybe an old style speedometer, maybe even an old style speedo with tach, something like that. But you know what? It's been digital since its inception. It's always been that way. I've heard other people complain about the fact that it is hard to see in the sunlight, and they're right. It kind of is. But those are little things. Those are little semantics. The fit and finish on this compared to riding a Sportster, the Sportster 1200 and the Harley 883 Iron, it was more of a raw ride to me. This vibrates. The Bolt, the Yamaha, does vibrate. You feel it in the foot pegs. You feel it in the handlebars. But it's not as raw as the Harley. The Harley really is much more of a raw experience. The Bolt seems to be like it's trying to give you a little of that sense, but a little more civilized. Having the wheelbase at 61.8 inches is kind of smart. You don't have that super long wheelbase like I've got on my Valkyrie, so cornering is still really fun and really quick and zippy on this bike, but 61.8 inches is still long enough that you get that straight line stability even going up at speeds. So with fifth gear the way it is, even at 75, I didn't think it was screaming at me so loud that I found it obnoxious or anything. I thought it was very, very good. And the motor does sound nice. It really does. but I didn't really feel like I absolutely needed that 6th gear. I felt like, 5th is kind of getting it done. Now, I wouldn't go on, the Oklahoma highways, and you get on those highways in the Midwest where the speed limit's 80 and 85, and you're on it for hours and hours and hours. It might start to wind out a little loud and get on your nerves a bit. But, for buzzing around town and just jumping on the highway and getting to work, this is a great bike. And 51 miles per gallon, it's kind of a sipper for being as quick as it is. And with a 0 to 60 of 4.9 seconds, it's still pretty quick for how efficient it is. If I did have one major criticism about the Bolt, it would be the same criticism I have about the Harley 48, and that is to give it such a small fuel tank standard. To me, it's kind of ridiculous. 3.4 gallons out of that teardrop. It's just not enough. One more gallon would have made a world of difference, especially because if you go on Yamaha's website, they do tout this as a cruiser you can be on for a long time. That's kind of one of their selling points if you look on their website. Well, if I'm going to be on it a long time, that's more than 150 miles before I have to find a gas station. Really 140 miles if I'm on an interstate and I want to be safe about it. So, that's something to consider. So the compression ratio, I think, is 9 to 1. It's a 60-degree V-twin. It gives you really good low-end torque. It really does. When you hammer this thing off the line, it really does kind of deliver. Now, it's not the fastest bike you've ever been on. You're not going to win any land speed records, but it's quick. It's quick enough, and it looks great. The thing about Yamaha is they think their stuff out. Even though this thing kind of looks like a bruiser, they really thought about the internals, low friction internals. Rocker arms on down. They think in terms of how can we make this motor reduce vibration in the motor? How can we make the motor last longer? So even though it's an air-cooled machine, if you buy one of these, I just have this gut feeling you're going to have it for a really long time. It's just probably one of those hard-to-kill motors. It's the same motor, too, I think they use in the B-Star 950. And it's just rock-star good. Yamaha's just rock-star good. If I was an older rider and I couldn't do the super heavy bikes anymore, this would definitely be my answer. The whole time I was on it, I was like, this is so much lighter than my Valkyrie. I mean, it's like flicking around a sport bike or something. But, if you're an older rider and you're looking for something that's much more easy to manage, but still looks really cool and it's dependable, and you're not going to have to worry about it, the Yamaha Bolt RSPEC really kind of is a good answer for its weight and seat height.
Wow. All right. This is fun. These are just under $9,000 brand new. You can get them used for $5 or $6,000. Great bike. Fantastic bike. You want the Harley sense of the sporty or the 883 iron, but you want the build quality of the Japanese. Bingo. You've got it. The Yamaha Bolt RSPEC. I mean, it's simple but fun, and it comes off as a very controlled machine. It gives you a little bit of raw, but pulls it back a bit. It does remind me of the iron. Of course, it was made to compete with it. There's some things I like about the iron more than I like about this. The way the exhaust is on the iron, I like that better. This is kind of strange. So to me, the iron sounds better. The iron feels a little more raw. I like big, heavier bikes, and that's why I ride a Valkyrie. And I love my BMW R1200. But if I was going to get a nice super light cruiser, this would be a great answer. Nothing wrong with a Bolt. Nothing wrong with a Bolt. That's my review of the Yamaha Bolt RSPEC. Put Jesus on the front, pray before you go. TG MotoRider, signing off.